Greetings and salutations. Welcome to this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Before we begin, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share this video with a friend. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. My guest today is a poet, playwright, and teaching artist born in Anaheim, California, and is currently based in Oslo, Norway. She has a PhD in creative writing from Lancaster University in England, a BA in theater arts from Texas A&M University, and teaches at Vagan Upper Secondary School for the visual and performing arts. Her work often juxtaposes mindsets with landscapes, culture with nature, and often reflects on the themes of identity, place displacement, mental disorders, human rights, and human obligations. Her plays include Ripeness is All, Light as Her Bones, and The Ant Farm. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ren Powell. Yes, thanks for doing this.
Hey.
Especially considering the time difference. I don't know why it was. And we talked about this when we were going back and forth, and I had asked if you were in West Coast time, you're like Oslo. Yes, for some reason I thought you were like Pacific Northwest.
Actually, I'm Stavanger, so I am the west side of Norway in the spoon. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm on the southwest, but of Norway. Yeah.
Okay. All right. How long have you been there?
I've been here 30 years.
Wow.
So quite a long time.
What took you to Oslo?
Well, I had finished my BA in Texas. And I was dating a guy from Norway, decided all of a sudden biological clock kicked in. And I thought, oh, I can write there. That's not a problem. I can do theater in Norway. So we agreed we'd try it here. And it wasn't what I expected. It wasn't easy to do theater here. I had just had several productions at the university that I graduated from. I was ready to go and 100% decided to work in the theater. And I spent all of my college career going back and forth between visual arts and creative writing and primatology and theater. And I finally settled on that, moved here. I called up the local theater as soon as I got here. An American was working as the dramaturge there, the literary manager. And he told me that in Norway, they don't volunteer at theaters. Everything was union run. There were no amateurs in the theater. And basically, there wasn't a lot I could do. I started writing I took some workshops to kind of get a foot in the writers groups. And I wrote a play for this stage. And as I started to write, I realized I didn't know the culture. In Texas, I had been writing a lot of feminist work. I had been doing a lot of performance work more than traditional plays. I was really influenced by Holly Hughes and Rachel Rosenthal and those kinds of writers. And I started writing about feminine hygiene products in Norway, which don't exist here. Women here didn't do that. So I was so out of touch with the culture, it was a shock to feel suddenly I had nothing to say that anybody wanted to hear or that was relevant to anyone's life. And that was difficult. Fortunately, the dramaturge recommended that I translate some work as a way to learn the language better and to see what was going on in theater. So I started doing that. I translated a few plays and translated one work called Kitchen Stories for the stage. It was a film. I think it's a Swedish film, Bent Hammer. And then that kind of segued into translating poetry. So I wound up working as a poetry translator and began writing a lot more poetry that was easier to reach out, and especially internationally. And I had, as a translator, it was sort of an apprenticeship. And I began working with PEN International as the Women's Writers Committee representative from Norway, and then the International Human Rights representative, and traveled a lot to Kyrgyzstan, among other places. And my life became more about poetry than theater, and I missed it very much. The thing is, in Europe, text theater is considered dead. Theater is much more physical. I came to like it. I have seen Zoo's Story performed by an Italian group that is so exciting. They just aren't as text-oriented as England and America, so that writers don't have the same kind of status in theater. I found out another one of these workshops that I did where we wrote short plays that were about 20 minutes long, and they were produced by the local professional actors and a director. And I had written a short piece that was very, very important to me. It was very personal, and it was subtle, the turning point and the drama. And when they staged it, I was shocked because they turned it into a murder mystery, and there was no murder. There was no, they had searched to find some drama in the text that was physical, couldn't find it. And I realized, oh gosh, I'd written a poem and was thinking that belonged on stage. So I learned a lot from a lot of mistakes. And wound up doing, when I started teaching at the theater, or at the high school, I started working with a colleague, and we did a lot of performance work for a few years around.
There's so many places that I want to touch on, and hopefully I can remember everything based on what you just said, because there's so much. How about culturally, what was the learning curve in that, as far as theater goes and playwriting? I mean, because if I'm not mistaken, there's a rich history of text theater playwriting in Norway, considering Henrik Ibsen. Yet there's the extent of my Norwegian playwrights. But I mean, is there no appreciation in that kind of work anymore? Did they just evolve, or is it devolving? I mean, unpack that for me. Tell me what that looks like.
Okay. There is a respect for writers here. That's absolutely true. But theater is considered a collaborative art, which of course it is in America too, but more so in the sense that it is more of a visual medium, and it is more about movement and spectacle and poetry. That I have seen very few text-based pieces that work well in Norway. I think that Ibsen was and is tremendously important to Norwegians, but when they set up Ibsen now, it's interesting what they do to it. It's if you were to watch it without sound, you wouldn't recognize it as Ibsen. It becomes it's very experimental and very alive. And as far as other Norwegian playwrights, we have Jon Fosse, who just won the Nobel Prize. And he hadn't been writing for very long. He started out, his work was produced here locally. And I actually translated one of his, a part of one of his novels that was staged as a play. And then I was invited to translate one of his other works, and I met with him. We had lunch. I adore his language. His plays have a very special rhythm. It's all about the music of the language, not about realistic dialogue, not about snappy dialogue, not about clever dialogue. It is music, repetition. And that, I think, is more important in his plays than plot or, well, really anything else. In the end, I declined to translate his play because when you translate the language, that's one thing. You can do that. Anyone can do that. You can sit down and you can translate the language, and it might be fun, especially with his language it's exquisite. His poetry is really wonderful. But when it came to looking at the entire text, the entire play, I didn't know what it was about. I couldn't understand what he was trying to say. I couldn't get into it, in the sense that I couldn't twist myself to communicate what he wanted to communicate, which as a translator you have to do. You have to kind of get inside and sort of play act that intention. And I wasn't able to do that with his work.
So two questions on that.
And
And real quick, by the way, for those that are listening and watching, there's a delay only because of the distance between us. So bear with those pauses and dead air for a little bit. What am I to understand that it's just a language barrier that's keeping you from understanding what he's trying to say? That if somebody else who spoke the language would completely understand what he's trying to what's the word I'm looking for, portray, or would anybody have that same problem?
In my case, I think if you're familiar with Edmund by David Mamet,
sure,
that was a play I struggled with a lot in college. Yeah, in college, I didn't know if it was an ironic play, if it was misogynist, I didn't know what to do with that play.
Sure.
And like a Lars von Trier film or something, I just didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know. And I think with Jan Foss's plays, not to directly compare it to David Mamet's, but I believe it's the gender aspect that someone explained it to me later, that they thought his plays were a man who was living in a post-feminist world who didn't know his role as a man. I'm not sure if that is an accurate. I respect very much the person who said this. I'm not sure that it's accurate, but it makes sense to me, and it makes sense why I wasn't able to understand it enough to get in there and write, to do a translation. Sure. That I'm married to Norwegians. I have 2 Norwegian kids. If I get stuck on the language itself, I ask. Sometimes the literal translation is completely wrong. My oldest son actually works as a translator, so I often go to him if I need him to double check something.
Sure.
So I don't think that was it. I think it was more of a culture and a gender issue.
Okay. And then you said there's a lot of
too.
Okay. You said there's a lot of there's musicality, there's a repetition. So what does that look like on the page? Because if it's not text based, and I know that phrase might be incorrect, but if it's not based around the text, what does playwriting look like in a non-traditional sense, as far as structure and format and whatnot go?
From what I've seen in Norway, often it is formatted the same way as American and British text. It looks very similar. And on the surface, you may not notice until it's staged how physical it is. Right now, I'd say half to 2/3 of the work that's done here is adaptations of novels, things that are familiar. Very few original new plays. That they're doing Alexander and Fanny and Alexander. They're doing that right now at the local theater, for example. And they'll do Shakespeare. Cherry Orchard, I saw a wonderful production of Cherry Orchard. It was very fun to look at that and compare it to the National Theatre of Britain, the National Theatre's Cherry Orchard, which was done in traditional costumes. It's traditional set. It's exactly what you would expect if you were to see that. The production here, well, I don't know. The set was a bunch of rocks and open visible lighting, and got kind of stranger from there. A little bit surrealist. But the text was there. But the text doesn't drive the production.
So if going back to Ibsen, then does it become, you said you may not recognize it. So is it become an interpretation of the story where the focus isn't mainly on the text? So the story is still there, or is it just really completely, I don't want to say different, there's a better word for it, obscure?
Deconstructed?
Sure.
Yeah, they'll do both. It depends on the audience that they're serving and what they want to do. So some of the smaller, more avant-garde venues will do really risky work. And then the National Theatre in Oslo will be a bit more traditional, but they would never set up anything that looks like museum theater or dead theater or deadly theater, if you want to talk about Brooke, but nothing like that. They had a production, I'm trying to remember which of Ibsen's plays that was, but in 2008, I think it was, in Bergen, the beginning has the audience, or the actors are on stage naked with a lot of blood, and the audience has to walk past them to get to their seats. And then some of the characters were puppets, puppet heads. And I might be mixing things up, but I think it went on like 8 hours into the night. The police had to shut it down because it was too noisy for the community.
Wow.
So it's very physical. And because of that, I took an interest in physics. I'm not a dancer. I have wanted to be all my life. I wanted to be Leslie Ann Warren. I wanted to dance and can't. But movement I can do, and I love teaching movement. And I look to companies, it's actually a British company like DV8 or Forced Entertainment. And the way Tim Nichols writes with Forced Entertainment, so they have text in their productions, but the text and the work grows together. Instead of Nichols coming with his finished script or poems or whatever they're using and says, here, use this, they kind of work on it together back and forth, which I think is really exciting.
I want to go back a little bit and talk. I want to touch on translations and translating. Are you translating Norwegian to English or English to Norwegian?
Only Norwegian to English.
Okay.
I don't hear Norwegian music. I've been here 30 years and I still don't hear it well enough to, if I were to try and write that, it would not be good enough. I know that. It wouldn't meet my expectations. And sometimes when I think something sounds really great in Norwegian, it doesn't, because I'm hearing an American melody in the Norwegian vocabulary.
Sure.
So I have never tried to do that because of the kind of writing I do.
Okay, fair enough.
I think music is so important.
Sure. And then in that aspect, I mean, how fluent were you in Norwegian when you started doing those translations?
Not at all. I was not fluent. When I think I had been here a year and a half and I had an infant, when this friend called from the theater and suggested I translate a play, and I said, I can't do that. I don't understand the language well enough to do that. And he said, you don't need to. You need to know your own language, and you need to get a lot of help with what the words you don't understand mean and the contexts, but that the most important thing is that you know your own language and you write well in that language. And so actually I learned Norwegian by translating. I read much better than I can understand the spoken language still. I can understand all the dialects in the 2 different written forms without any problem. And Danish and Swedish, Swedish not so great, but I can do that. So you really don't have to understand everything about the language itself to translate it, as long as you have a context and have the people you can ask and double check, have some other eyes on it, make sure that you didn't miss something.
So does that mean you're sitting down with a Norwegian to English book, and then like you're going through, let's just say you've got this, let's take it just a monologue, for instance, and you just go word for word, and then like you can kind of piece it together from there? Is that what that looks like? Or I'm fascinated by this, and it's a you always see these new adaptations. Oh, the new adaptation from so and so, and I guess that's kind of how some people get away with copyright. I guess they might take 2 different translations, put them together into their own, and then so now you've got this new one. But outside of that, is that really what you're doing? You're sitting down and putting with a Norwegian to English dictionary or whatever language that may be?
Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes. And then you would do, a word for word translation, and then you'd have to actually look at it and see, because idioms and things like that. So sometimes word for word is not correct. Or the most ridiculous translation I ever did. I was doing a book of poems from a really well-established poet, and he had been writing a poem about Ohrid in North Macedonia, and talked about the morning, this word, bønner. And that word can mean prayers, beans, or farmers.
Oh, wow.
So I thought morning prayers, because in Macedonia that there are the call to prayers, several times a day. And I thought that must have been correct. And when we sat down, we always sat down with the authors side by side and go through the entire text. And he laughed and said, no, it's beans. They have beans for breakfast in Macedonia. So you can really get it wrong if you don't have someone looking over your shoulder and working closely with the writers. And while I was learning the language, the writers knew that I didn't know the language.
There's a farce in there somewhere about this playwright who sees this amazing work and wants to bring it to the States and does this production that's completely off, and that they invite the original playwright and he's excited and they make a big hoopla over it. It's just completely wrong. Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Wow. I don't even know where to go with that. So I want to go into your history and your experience of playwriting with where you started out, and I want to touch on Ripeness for All, because it's described as an erasure / adaptation of King Lear. What does that mean? An erasure. Obviously, adaptations are one thing, but an erasure.
I've never heard of an erasure being used to describe theater work at all, but it's a kind of poetry form where you take a finished poem and you cut out words, and then what's left is its own poem. So what happened was last January, I had decided to focus on playwriting again. There were a lot of things that happened that led up to that. But I saw on Facebook somewhere a call asking if anyone was interested in doing an all-female adaptation of King Lear. And there were a lot of comments under how stupid it was, and and it couldn't be done in such a short amount of time. And I thought, oh, that sounds like a good challenge. So I applied to do the work, and found out in March that I was going to do it, and I had put off my summer. I have 8 weeks of summer vacation and some of that time, so I had put off around 12 weeks to do the work. So I knew I wouldn't be writing anything from scratch. The arts director, he wanted the piece to be as close to Shakespeare, or Shakespeare just twisted and small adaptations, maybe modernized a little, kind of thing. He wasn't sure. And he wanted that all-female cast. So I thought about what happened recently in Texas, and about how they're having trouble. I know what it is to be in a university and not have enough men to play the male roles, and not having enough roles for all the women who are talented and need to be on stage. And I thought making a adaptation that was gender neutral, that the director could decide who is which gender, or if they're non-binary, who cares. So that was the idea. So when I started looking at Lear, I really like Lear, but I have trouble with the idea that Lear is a protagonist. Lear starts out crazy, and he goes kind of back and forth and ends up crazy. And to a contemporary audience, he's fascinating to actors, but I don't think to a contemporary audience that we can feel much for him. It's not really identifiable. And then I started looking at Edgar. Edgar's character starts off naive, completely. His brother pulls a wool over his eyes. He's just lost, and he goes through all of these experiences and takes on different identities and goes through this learning process. And in the end of the play, he actually is the one who stands up and puts things right. And I thought he's the protagonist. So I got excited about that. So what I did was create a new scene at the very beginning to make sure that character is centered, and that we follow them and push Lear's story to the background. And I kept a lot of, maybe half of the script is Shakespeare's text, and the rest is mine. I wrote in Alexandrines instead of blank verse. I don't know why. My voice just wanted to come out in Alexandrines. Alexandrines has an extra foot. It's 6 beats per line instead of blank verse, which is only 5. So that I kept the verse, but mine is 6 beats instead. And yeah, so that was also
Okay, so
another
hold that
thing I
thought.
didn't think.
Hang on, real quick, because I want to
Yeah.
make sure that I understand it. I want to make sure, just in case the audience does as well. So the text is the text hasn't changed, correct? Or or you're adding an
I
extra
haven't.
syllable somehow.
No. Oh, okay. I see what you. No, I kept about half of the text from Shakespeare. The rest I wrote
Got it.
new verse
Got it.
text.
Got it. Understood. Okay.
Yeah.
So everything that you're writing is, the set of blank verse. You're okay. Understood. Got it. Okay. I was trying to think of like, okay, we're translating this, but now I'm just
No, it was
altering
fun to write because I was writing in verse.
Sure. Got it. Okay. Understood. Thank you. Sorry about that. Continue, please.
That is. The other thing that was difficult, I think, in Lear is that I think there's like 7 letters in Lear, these plot devices where people get information in the form of a letter, which we would never let a contemporary playwright get away with. So I created a new character named Rumor, and drew from the astrology that's already in the Lear play. There's a scene where Edmund is talking about the astrology to Edgar and their foolish father. And so I have this character who has I put in the description, I want her to wear a bat book, which is a medieval prophecy book that women would wear around their waist. And she takes that role to help the information that doesn't need to be in a letter now. And sure. She is hopefully a choir if they have enough cast members that can go to these different places and say what needs to be said. And she speaks in prophecies modeled very much after Nostradamus. So I tried to keep it as close to the original feel while not pretending that it's Shakespeare as such.
Did you write your prophecies in quatrains then? Since you're going the Nostradamus route, or?
Yeah, I can't remember if they were quatrains. I think that they were. I'm trying to remember. I thought they were all 3 lines, but they were written in verse. So I do remember that.
Yeah. I'm just curious. So if you stuck to that. So, all right. So you obviously, I'm assuming you met your deadline.
Oh, yeah. If that was such a gift. I got the job in March.
Okay.
May. I was planning on starting in the last half of May, and beginning of May, I was diagnosed with cancer. So
sorry to hear that.
I kept it quiet for a while. Well, I tell you, if I didn't have the writing to get me through that, the first months was that nasty chemo, and it was hard, and it gave me something I had to get done. I had to focus on, and I enjoyed it so much. So it was really a gift, something quite amazing. So I'm grateful for the kind of coincidence of me getting that job at the same time. So I did meet the deadline. I was 2 days early, and we had a table reading. It was produced in Washington State by a tiny little community theater, and they did a table reading for me over Zoom, which was really nice. One of the problems I have with getting excited about playwriting is it's so hard when I know I'm not going to see the finished products, or I can't work with the collaboration. I just have to hand it off. And
right, sure.
Sometimes never know exactly what happened.
So was the company that did it, was that the people that hired you on to do it?
Yeah. It's a small little community theater in a tiny town up in Washington.
Okay.
And they were doing a year of Shakespeare. And he had the idea to do an all-woman production of Lear. So, yeah.
Well, congratulations.
But I'm
sounds like it was
hoping I can get. Thank you. I'm hoping I can get universities to look at it because I think it's good for universities.
Sure. You mentioned one of the things in your bio is you said human rights and human obligations. What is that? Obviously human rights, but where does obligations come into play as far as your playwriting goes?
I think when I first started writing for Penn, I was very much an idealist. I worked also for an organization that helped find temporary, what do we call that? It was in Norwegian. That we found temporary housing, not housing, but we got countries to take in people. So writers who are being persecuted, we would find a city in a country that would take them for a little while as a guest to get them out of danger, and then back. And with that, I ran a couple of different literature programs and literary magazines, and for their work, and I put Americans' work alongside of it to try and get people to read it. Americans generally don't want to read work in translation or work from other countries. So I did projects like that. So I was very idealistic, but by the time I left, I was very concerned about people, about human rights, but also responsibilities for other people. We not in the political sense, but even in a family, the idea that yes, you can expect these things, but you also are obligated to do these other things, whether you want to or not. There is an obligation there.
Sure.
And that we sometimes, I think because I teach high school, I see a lot of focus in those years of what people owe me instead of what do I need to do. They all outgrow that, but it's there. But we don't all outgrow it. So
sure.
That I think a lot of my work takes on those responsibilities. Ant Farm is a very, very short play, but its siblings, and one sibling has left and let the other one deal with an ailing mother. And this kind of the reunion of those, it's not an unfamiliar scenario, but this kind of obligation, and where do these lines cross personally for people? So I think that's on a personal level. On a political level, yeah, that's big. And I haven't so far written big political plays, or even, sure. I do have a book of poems that are political. They include erasures, where I have taken legal documents from some of the people that I worked with and erased sections, blacked them out as though they were censored until there was the words meant the opposite of what the original document said, things like that.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I don't think that had anything to do with your question, but yeah.
No. But the one thing that you touched on, and I'm curious as well, and I'm sure that this can come into playwriting as well, or playwrights. How much literary prosecution is there towards writers? If there's an organization that's there to find salvation, or now I'm in the place of like trying to remember where that sanctuary, I guess. That there's organizations that are out there trying to find sanctuary for writers. How prominent is that? And is that something we as Westerners take for granted?
Yeah, I think so. I think that I've been away from America for 30 years. So when Americans talk about free speech, I get confused about what exactly free speech is to them. For a while, when I was working for that project, I got a telephone call from China once while I was changing and trying on a new pair of jeans. And he was being monitored, and we were trying to get him out of the country because he had criticized the food production. Kind of like Sinclair kind of thing. We had several people from Zimbabwe a while back during those years. Chechnya.
Chechnya?
We have a lot of Chechnyans. Yes.
Okay.
And Iran. I think we've had 3 or 4 from Iran. Algeria.
Is this journalism, or
Algeria?
Is this even basic nonfiction writing? Is it poetry? Is it playwriting? Is it, or is it just strictly journalists who are putting?
No, these are all literary writers. They're all writing poetry or novels with heavy symbolism in them, novels that criticize religion sometimes. That most of them are literary writers. I don't recall any playwrights in there, but there's a sister organization called the Muse, I think. They're in Denmark, and they take care of musicians. And I think they've had playwrights. So it's much more, I think
sorry. Yeah. I'm trying, is this just betrayal where people are turning in friends and family because they know if the work isn't done yet, or maybe the work is done, it's been released, and now it's okay, who did this come from? We're coming out and we're going to, we're on the hunt. Or is somebody turning these people in and saying, hey, I know this person's writing things that would be not ill-sought, would not be well served if against the establishment, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. We did get some writers in who had pamphlets that they were distributing, that they had printed up, some small shop, not a big one. I'm trying to remember the name of the theater group that is in exile now, and where they're from. I'm so embarrassed, I can't remember right now.
If it pops in your head, great. If not, no
Britain
worries.
has offered them. Britain offered them asylum, and they refused asylum because they didn't want to disappear. They wanted to be a pain in the neck. They wanted to create a fuss, and so that and that was wonderful because that was also performative action, so that suited them. So that I think America is still pretty much in isolation in terms of things like that, but there are amazing, wonderful people who work with PEN America who are working with the writers overseas.
PEN America is what exactly, for those of us who don't know?
Well, PEN was established during the Cold War. Arthur Miller was the first president, and he the idea was to get the work from the Soviet writers out of the Soviet Union, to get to the West, to get their work out. When the Soviet Union collapsed, Penn has gone through a lot of discussions I've heard and witnessed about what is Penn's mandate now. What do we do?
Sure.
So that it's still, the idea is to promote the freedom of speech, to help writers who are being persecuted, and to the Women's Writers Organization. I don't know if they're still doing it, but when I was part of that, they were also trying to promote literacy.
Oh, wow.
So,
what is it like? What is your, as somebody from America who's teaching in Norway, what does that look like? What is your role? Is your role to, well, I guess it could be both, that you're bringing your perspective to the table, but at the same time you're learning their perspective. And does that become a new form of collaboration? How does that work? What does that look like being you're there for 30 years now, so I'm not quite sure that, certainly not a newcomer to the table by any means, so I'm just curious.
And it's my teaching role has changed enormously from when I first started teaching. That absolutely, I was very academic, and I was very, I'm still academic, but I was learning the language. I spoke like a teenager for years. I probably still do, because I learned to speak the language from them. And I introduced my students to, say, Rachel Rosenthal, who nobody had ever heard of. And now what I do, I really enjoy teaching movement. So when I do productions, I have my second year students, I will do a large production with them. And we usually work physically first, do different kinds of techniques and improvisations, and then pin things down and then create stories over that. And then I will write the stories for them and they will translate them. Unless the students want to write. And usually there's one every year who writes really well and wants to. And so I will write it and they will translate it. Or let's see, 2 years ago, I did the first time I did an entire adaptation of Maeterlinck's Bluebird. And we had the theme of climate crisis. And that was the first time I had done that. I came to them with a finished adaptation and they translated it. And then we have done kind of things based on Brecht, where I will tell them the Brecht story. We will talk about where it should be, what kind of story we want to tell, and then I'll write the script and they translate it. So it's collaborative.
Sure.
And I don't own any of the scripts when I do this. They're the property of the school. And I want to make sure that it doesn't become about me. I'm a teacher in that role. I'm supposed to be nurturing other people's talents. I'm not supposed to be taking center stage, and it is not supposed to be my production. And that's why last January I decided, I think maybe I'm getting so old that I better put myself center stage and make my productions now, or I'm going to run out of time. So
Sure.
that, I'll be doing a little bit of both now.
So two questions on that, because I do want to touch on something, and then I want to go back to where you find yourself going from this point forward in your writing. When it came to, I think you had said you'd written a short play, and it became a murder mystery, and you had mentioned also that if you saw something from Ibsen, you wouldn't necessarily recognize it. So is it just, are they taking more of an interpretative approach to playwriting now to make it more theatrical or performance based, if you will, opposed to telling the story that's on the page?
No, I think they will tell the story that's on the stage, but they won't do it in a way. Well, say if you took Ibsen and you closed your eyes and watched the play, or you can't do that, but if you were in the theater and closed your eyes, you would hear the play and you would be able to follow it. Or you could be in this theater and not hear and follow it with your eyes and figure it out. But I think the way that they're doing these productions, where they marry the visual and the oral together, that if you don't have all of the elements that create the theater together as a whole, you're not going to make any sense of it. I think it's much more integrated than I've seen in most things in America, if that makes sense.
Can you expand on that? Can you give an example?
Well, okay, the Cherry Orchard, I mentioned that one before, where you have the characters standing on stage on small rocks, and there's snow on the ground, and there's these lights are being rolled in, these light trees are being rolled in and off stage while she's saying her text. And if you can't, if you just glanced at that and heard that and didn't know exactly that line from Chekhov, then you wouldn't recognize it. They're not wearing period costumes. You might think they borrowed it from something else. I'm thinking actually a good example is an American, where is Robert Wilson. He did When the Dead Awaken. And he put one of the characters in a bear suit and for the entire play. And one of the women screamed her lines every time. So that as soon as she opened her mouth, you just braced yourself for the screech. He told the story, but he took the text and turned it into something else that was expressive besides just hearing the text as storytelling. It was much more illustrative of her personality and how Ibsen wanted you to experience her with that screaming. And that character who was a bear through the entire thing was this ultra masculine, animalistic character.
Okay.
So, yeah, Wilson, he's an American, but that's that kind of work, I think, that we see here a lot.
Sure.
And Wilson's been here a couple times.
You've decided to go back to your playwriting. What kind of approach are you going to be taking now? Are you going to be kind of just going back to your roots and taking that Western approach? Not to say that Norway isn't part of the West. But an American approach, a traditional approach, or are you going to be integrating some of what you've learned? And is your writing going to be more for a Norwegian audience, or are you going to be writing more for an American audience and submitting your work here?
A little bit of both. I have a script that's finished that is based on Norwegian mythology that's very physical. There's Loke, who is punished. He's tied to a rock and venom drips from a snake into his eyes, which causes earthquakes. And his wife holds a bowl. Well, she holds the bowl over his face, and it's when she empties the bowl that it goes into his eyes. And it's built up around her story, her point of view, and it's a lot of earthquakes and a lot of these mythical shape changing. I mean, Loke is both genders and turns himself into a bull or a mare, actually, and gives birth. And it's very, very physical. I don't know how to write that script. I've written it, but I don't know if anybody can read it and understand what I'm doing, because I
Right.
feel like that needs to be developed on stage with the actors and with the director. Um, so that's very difficult.
I mean, does that come into? I mean, here's a prime example does this become where stage directions become important uh, to at least give the idea of what you're trying to achieve? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting, and this is just an aspect that we haven't really touched on, and how do you relay that information to, especially if you're not there to 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 participate in that collaboration? Is that
Yeah,
where,
it's like
you know? Yeah.
how did Sarah Kane ever get her work produced? I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming she worked hand in hand with the director and explained those crazy stage directions
Can you
that
expand on that? Because I'm not familiar with Sarah Kane, and that's just me not being as up to snuff on
uh,
everything that's current.
what
Um,
um, Sarah Kane was part of the In Your Face movement in Britain. So a lot of blood, a lot of really disturbing things on stage, raping babies or exploding heads and things like that. It's really awful. Um, but if I'm remembering correctly, one of the stage directions was that there's I think it's a field of flowers grows up suddenly on stage, things like that. That
okay.
how do you do that? So I don't know. Did she write that script, bring it to a director, and then they talked about it, or did she submit it to someone and they actually made that leap all by themselves? And
Well, let's touch on that, Ren, because I mean, this has kind of come up in the past, and as a playwright, we've talked about, like, that's not your concern. Your concern is just to write it and let whoever is going to produce it, let them figure that out. You know,
yeah,
and do you find, and on that note, and that's not a criticism on you by any means. It's just like that's an aspect that I think sometimes as playwrights hold ourselves back, and we like, well, I don't know how to do this, so therefore I'm not going to write it. Where it's like, well, you don't hold yourself back. You tell the story, you let somebody else figure that out. You know, I think that there's
mm,
innovation in those aspects. I mean, you're saying, you know, you bring up how do those flowers grow, and in my head, from a producing standpoint, I'm like, oh wait, how would you do that? You know, is it
mm,
as simple as, you know, maybe you don't have the risers underneath the stage, you know, the hydraulics that would make that happen, you know, and in what other ways could you do that? And
mm,
yeah, I don't know. So
yeah.
anyways, point being, um, at what point do you not worry about that yourself and let somebody else handle that uh obstacle, you know, for
No,
what
I
it's
think
worth?
I appreciate you saying that because I think that is part of my problem. I overthink things. Um, I'm afraid to put it out there that
Sure.
things just hang there. Not good at networking. So no, I appreciate you saying that. That it is a good reminder that that isn't my business. That to write the work,
Well,
send it out.
well, yeah, I think it depends on where we stand. I think that sometimes, you know, we tackle things all, you know, we take all the jobs of ourselves sometimes, like, okay, well, I'm the one who's got to direct this and produce it. So how do
Mm,
I achieve this? Where you know, especially if you don't have a budget to work with, to where it's like you're the one who's responsible, where you can't afford to pay a production designer to come in and like figure that out and kind of like
yeah,
look at a different angle. So,
that's.
but
Mhm.
I think that that's one of our hangups as artists. It's like we've got to figure this out, or else nobody's going to want to produce it or stage
Mm.
it. Where I think we have to forgive ourselves and like just tell the story, and you know, hopefully somebody will be so intrigued by the imagery. So, anyways, continue the story that you were saying as far as like taking this mythical translation and going, you know, taking it to the stage.
Yeah, but that's one kind of work I'm still doing. These very poetic, physical works.
Mhm.
One that is on the Playwrights Exchange also has some of the characters walking a different tempos through the entire play. One of them lives to be 80, the other one dies at 33, but they're both on stage until the end. Those kinds of things. That so I'm working on that. Also, because I have been working with teenagers for so long and under certain kinds of constraints, I made a call to the local British theater company. They're amateurs, but I talked to them and they're interested in doing some pub theater. I miss pub theater from Texas. And for me, that's going back to school. I'm going to write small 10-minute pieces, make sure that I have good arcs and that nothing's too subtle. I write far too subtly, and it's too much of the poet in me, that I expect deep reading in a play, and that's absurd. So for me, that's going back to school. And that's exciting. They have a kind of a resident playwright who's from Wales. Her name is, what's her name? Wendy Pagler. And she has been doing pantos with them. And I don't know if you know what a panto is.
No, but I'm
so much fun. It's
you're dropping terminology that I can't wait to talk about. So,
it's an English Christmas tradition. It's the community theater where the town lawyer gets up and does the main role and that kind of thing. That is real community theater. Pantos are family productions. They break the fourth wall. They throw candy into the audience. They sing songs. I think Ian McClellan, there's a YouTube clip where he did one and dressed up as a woman. And they generally, the larger pantos hire somebody like Judi Dench to be in the panto. But it's a Christmas tradition. So I'm excited to go see one for the first time.
Are these productions, are they written? Is that something, oh, here's a panto I can read? Or is it like they're just kind of like, are they actually rehearsed and they actually have a traditional theatrical approach to them? Or is it just like kind of like, okay, all right.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated. I need to see one of these.
Yeah, they have some fun ones on YouTube. And they're fairy tales. They're done around fairy tales. So it's interesting because Norway doesn't have anything like that. So, and America doesn't either.
No,
community theaters like that.
Fascinated. That's wonderful. And so, wait, so you mentioned like the town lawyer. So what, they just try to get people from the local community that are of importance, and then they just put them on stage like, hey, look, we're going to do this thing. If you got the time, come out and let's do it. The local mayor or whatnot.
Yeah, who's always, especially if it's a mayor, he's always wanted to stand center stage, right? Or she.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So it's, yeah.
Oh, I'm not quite sure if we have it in LA. And I mean, you've been away from LA for a while, but so maybe, so pub theater, tell me about this.
Oh, I haven't done it.
I know I've heard the term, I think once or twice, but I'm not quite sure. We certainly haven't covered it on any episode. So let's talk about pub theater and how maybe our listeners can bring it to their town.
Yeah, I just, it doesn't exist here. But when I was living in Texas, we were doing pub theater. It wasn't an organized group that did it. It was an actor who took a lot of initiative to arrange these. So we did like 3 people. It was a 3-hander, about 20 minutes. And we played in a pub. Yeah. Early. So you play before it gets really rowdy while it's still kind of quiet, just on the edge of when people are coming in. I don't remember what time it was. It probably like 8:30 or something. And this was on 6th Street in Austin, Texas. So this is just pub after pub after pub. And it's just, we did kind of, trying to remember, one of the ones we did was FM, which had a very adult theme to it. FM stands for mother.
Oh, yep, got it. All right,
So
here we go.
yeah, I can't remember who wrote it.
Wait, is it FM or MF?
But it's FM. It's much worse than you think it would be.
Oh, geez, that's even worse. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
And that one worked really well because it was 3 people sitting around a table discussing. It was like a creative writing group discussing this guy's short story, and it was nice because the setting was appropriate. We didn't need scenography, and I think we had an extra light and the microphone, and so that it worked really nicely. So it's very relaxed and very fun.
So, I mean, do you go in and you say, hey guys, we're going to present you a little piece, or do you guys just kind of go and set up and then kind of perform, drawing focus to you, but people are like, because therefore it becomes this eavesdropping thing, like, what's going on over here? And people don't know you're performing? Or is it like a presentational thing? Hey guys, thanks. Just so you know, we're going to do this piece for you. Sit back and enjoy.
Yeah, in that case, he announced them. But what you're talking about, this kind of invisible theater, wasn't that Boal or somebody who did that kind of work? That would be so much fun. But you'd have to be careful not to do anything. Other people would come and break in to calm people down, or be risky.
Sure. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But maybe we have somebody in the side, who's kind of there to kind of gauge the reactions. Like, when you get somebody who's getting a little upset, it's like, hey, don't worry, this is a stage thing. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So you said they're just short 10-minute pieces.
Yeah, there are 20 minutes, but I'm going to write 10. Yeah. I'm going to keep it a little bit shorter because Norwegians aren't used to it. They've never seen pub theater. But we have a little pub downtown that's agreed to have us in. They do improv there.
Okay. And then I have a question about that since you just brought that up. But let me ask this question first. So when it comes to pub theater, is the setting of the play the pub, or is it we're just performing in the pub, but a traditional setting might, whatever the actual setting of the piece is the setting, whether that's like hypothetically we're sitting in the woods around a fire.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that, but I think it would depend on the pub, what you could arrange.
Okay.
This one pub that they have an agreement with already has a small stage.
Oh, okay. All right.
They have done, so that there I have a lot more wiggle room, I think, without it being strange.
Got it. What does Norwegian improv look like or sound like?
Oh, the same. I think it's kind of a new form here. Traditionally, when I came here, there weren't any freelance actors, really. Everyone was hired out of the one theater school, the single theater school in the country. And then they were hired by a theater and, worked. They had the vacations and they had childcare and sick leave, and they had that job for life, basically. So sometimes they would move them around, shuffle them between theaters in Norway. And then over the last 30 years, they have opened, I think there's probably 6 universities now that offer theater degrees and acting for film. The film industry has taken off here quite a bit, and actors have learned how to act for film. The early Norwegian films, the actors are doing stage acting on the film. So it's very Lawrence. Yeah,
sure.
So now there are a lot more freelance actors, and they're doing improv of their own initiative. They have groups, they get different things. Here in Norway, I should mention this, they have a tradition of local theater called revy, which is a little bit like vaudeville reviews.
Oh, nice.
They do parody skits about the politicians. They have their standard caricatures that come in, and some satire, and that's the tradition here.
It sounds very big and exaggerated.
Yeah, they are. I had a hard time at first. To me, I didn't find it funny at all. It took, I think, then I needed to know the culture to like it. But yes, it was very theatrical, and they have amateurs, they have children's who do their own, and then the professionals did them as well, or do them. And now I think that the improv has kind of grown out of that. So I think the improv is a bit more animated and physical than maybe British improv.
So are they doing,
and also stand-up?
Oh, really? Okay. Are they doing short form games like Whose Line Is It Anyway? Or are they doing more long form like Harold and Bats and things like that?
Yeah, I haven't seen that. I've only seen these games. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. I haven't seen anyone attempt a longer one. Mm.
Okay,
I did take curious. The students. Yeah, there's a group in London, and of course I can't remember their names. I took my students to see them, where they do a 2-hour show, and you give them the place, the conflict, the character, and they go and make it a musical for 2, and you pick nice. Genres, things. So that I expect that's coming.
Sure.
As more people are allowed to be actors, and it's not this elitist kind of thing like it was, where just very few actors.
So you brought up something that is kind of a throwback to what we were talking about earlier, and I want to touch on that as well, because it's a cultural aspect of theater that I'm really kind of fascinated with now as well, since you brought it back up. Mm-hmm. You mentioned early on that theater in Norway is unionized, and it's a job in the know. Mm-hmm. So if it's so where does the funding come from? Who's paying for all this? Where does all the or is it, yes, it's unionized, but it's also federal or local or government run, subsidized? Mm-hmm. Where does that come into play?
So for example, our local theater has 3 stages, and they will put up the big musical that will appeal to everyone, and they will make in the money that pays for the rest of the season. They also get government funding. I don't remember how much, but I think it's close to half their budget, but I'm not quite sure. Might not be that much, but they do get government funding. And freelance work, everybody gets the union tariff. But you're not employed. You don't have an employment contract. That is freelance now. They didn't have it before, but they do now. Okay. But you can. I have gotten money from the government to put up performance pieces. I write in an application to the Arts Council and send it in, and they decide whether or not it's interesting, and sure. I can get money through that. So they have really good arts funding. I think it's on par with Canada. It's really good. Sure. Yeah. So that's. I mean, we pay. I can be very personal here. I pay 44% of my income in taxes. Wow. So that we have a lot of benefits. We have things like the arts. Not everybody always agrees. There's healthy arguments every year about what are we doing? Why are we paying for this? And universal health care and things like that. So the arts, it would be really hard for them to survive because a lot of it is earmarked for Norwegian language. The language is so small. Both of them. There's two written languages. And
what's the other one?
If they weren't funded, then the publishers wouldn't be able to make enough money selling the books to make up for their expenses. So that they need the subsidies from the government to keep the language alive, really. Jon Fosse, who just won the Nobel, he writes in the smallest language that we have, and has been very vocal lately about, I'm not the only one who writes in this, and whipping up support for the language.
Are those two languages, are they both Norwegian, but one's just a different, it's like, I have no reference, so I can't give you a comparison. I want to say something like Gaelic, but I don't think Ireland has anything besides English and Gaelic, so I can't use that as an example.
Yeah, no. Norway, there's a lot of fjords, and it's a little bit difficult it's used to be very difficult to travel from place to place. So every region has really distinct dialects. I can tell you 4 words for why. And they don't sound anything alike. And that's the spoken language. In the written language, you had the official language, which was kind of watered down Danish in a way. They tried to make it universal. And then there was a guy that went around through the country and tried to write down what people were saying in a more phonetically correct way. And that became this new Norwegian. So this other language. So now we have this bokmål, which means book language, and the new Norwegian. So that they're similar enough to be annoying that you and you can understand both, but written they follow their rules and they have a literary integrity. So I think that's the important thing, that they want to keep the literary integrity. And it's hard. My students, a lot of them prefer to speak English with me. All of them prefer that I speak English with them because they want to practice. And so, I respect that they want to fund English language Norwegian language projects.
Yeah, I don't blame them. There's it's just, it appears like it's falling away, and having that aspect of culture, kind of dwindle and diminish is scary and sad.
It is. Yeah, I think especially the very small language has the New Norsk, New Norwegian has a lot of words for nature things that we don't have in English. There's not even a good bokmål Norwegian word for it either. It's these very specific words that are so onomatopoeic. They're so delicious. And it would be a real shame to see those go. Yeah.
How has living in another culture helped your writing as a playwright?
Well, I'm learning that now. As a playwright, I think my mistakes are more obvious to me, I think.
How so?
In terms of, the play that I mentioned earlier, that I had written a play about an autobiographical moment in my childhood where this woman kind of destroyed my faith, in that she let me believe that she was in a wheelchair and that she couldn't walk. And then she did a whole big song and dance about the Bible and touched the Bible and then stood up and walked across the room. And it destroyed me because I just... while she's doing this, she's talking about her husband. Where is he? he went out to get something to eat or something, and that the director then made it about this dead husband that she had buried in the backyard or something, that he had made up an entire story because he couldn't find the story in my play. It was too subtle. It was too small. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't write it well enough. So that I think that because this person who was reading it didn't get involved in the language, he was looking at the structure of the drama, and too much of it was in the language. So that doesn't work here, if that makes sense. So,
no, 100%. But does it work here? Does that piece work in the States? Because I'm looking at it, I'm like that betrayal, that posturing of saying, look how real this is, I'm going to pretend, and look how miraculous this is, to, yes, of course it destroyed your faith. I don't blame you. And for somebody to use that to manipulate somebody else, I mean, there's so much conflict and there's so much, to me, drama in that. Now, I haven't read the piece, I haven't seen it. I'm just listening to the story, and so I can kind of put my own drama into that. So that's why I'm kind of curious in that regard. Was it your writing, or is it the difference in culture? And there's part of me that thinks it's unfair to put that on you. Okay. Just
no,
curious.
I will. Yeah, I'll take responsibility for that. I think so. The gauging things, because even when I was writing, I took playwriting in Texas. I had an instructor who kept saying, "Write to the pain, write to the pain." And
what does that even mean?
Then when I did write something very, yeah, I should write about my worst experience. It was one of those guru situations that actors often get into. He took the same approach to playwriting. So I wrote the story, and then he read it and said, "This isn't realistic. It wouldn't do this fast. It wouldn't resolve this fast." So I was very hurt, and I spent, I don't know, a year really kind of wounded before I realized that was criticism of the play, and I need to look at it and see what I believe as well. And when I did have a production, that particular instructor tried to get me shut down.
Hang on.
Production went on.
There's so many things that I'm so kind of this is kind of where, and this comes up in multiple conversations that I have on this podcast, and this to me highlights the problem with academia when it comes to playwriting. And this where I'm going to push what I think is correct on you. And I think so that just kind of bothers me that there's no, this is wrong and it doesn't work. How dare you? I doubt he listens to this, and I'll give you a prime example of something. And don't steal this, any of you. So when I was in college, and it's already been written, so there you go. When I was in college and I was in a playwriting class, I had my playwriting instructors. I was writing it was a confession booth, and it was a stripper in confession talking about the things that she's gone through and her issues and her struggles. And then what winds up happening is the veil comes up, and it's not a confession booth. It's a stripper booth where he's the one at a strip club, the private ones where the separator comes up and now she does her thing and he's there to indulge in a little sin. And the instructor said, "You can't write this. You don't know enough about Catholicism." And to me, F you. That can be a research. That can be me researching and finding the themes of. It was just like, how dare you tell somebody that's, you know, and so that's what that kind of reminds me of, like this authoritative voice in academia that will tell you what you can't do and what that does to the psyche of somebody who's trying to. I think that they have to learn how to fail. Don't tell them what they can't do. And then when they maybe they see those flaws in their writing when they do a table read or a stage reading, and it'll allow them to find the mistakes. But to sit there and tell them you're wrong before that even gets written, is just infuriating. I'm sorry. I was more ticked off about your story, and then it just reminded me of another aspect of academia that just kind of bothers me. So I'm sorry. So is that the similarity? Is it coming from an authoritative place that I know more than you? I don't want to project my story onto yours, so I don't know if that's the same.
Sometimes I think that, speaking as a teacher myself, it took me a couple years to learn to say I don't know.
Okay, yeah, great.
That when you come with work and the instructor looks at it and they feel obligated to say something, that sometimes I think they get desperate and say stupid shit. It's and it could also be, I think in this case there was this particular instructor had written a play on a similar theme that he was trying to get published himself or produced.
Okay.
So but I didn't know that year.
And is that the reason why he was trying to shut it down?
I never learned why. It took me a while to learn who it was that was trying to get me shut down.
Oh my God, that's even worse.
So yeah, no, he didn't ever. I was never even able to confront him. So yeah, but I think that's why now I'm really excited. With my students, I play. I am so creative when it's not a pressure, when we're in a room and just coming up with this or that off the top of my head with absolutely no pressure, because I'm not performing and I'm not writing anything. I'm just free. And I'm hoping I have learned by now to take that out of the classroom when I'm sitting alone and can keep that same kind of freedom, the same kind of thing when you talk to yourself in the shower and all of those wonderful arguments you have with people, that bring it out of the shower and bring it out of the classroom. That's my plan. And I hope that working with amateurs will be nice too, because I'm sure they'll give me feedback, but it won't be from an above down place. So that I'm really excited about it. Doing that. I have quite a few published books in poetry, and I feel very established there. I've gone to different festivals, and now I really want to get back to theater and my roots where I started. So yeah.
What outside of the mythological piece, what are you working on? Anything else besides that?
Not yet. Not in detail. I have a lot of notebooks full of things.
Will you write a panto?
No. I don't think writing a panto. I don't think that falls in my personality.
Okay.
That I'm excited to go see one. But I like, it's kind of, some of my colleagues, they direct musicals every year, and I refuse to take that job. It's supposed to kind of be passed around. All of us are supposed to do it, but I won't. It's 100 students sometimes on stage at once, and I cannot handle that. I want my 15 students maximum. and that's it. So small things. Yeah, I think one of my favorite, probably still my favorite play from when I was I think I was 14. I read Tad Daly's his play about Robert Scott Key and Edmondson, but the main character is the wife who is waiting at home while he goes off, and that very quiet play. That it was in my head, and then it fell out again. This chemo brain stuff is not going to go away.
Yeah, great.
No.
Where can people find your work?
I have a website. It's renpowell.com, and it links to everything. It links to my handmade books. It links to all of my published poetry, and it links to New Play Exchange.
Great.
And if people don't have a subscription to New Play Exchange, they can write me and I can mail a PDF if they're interested in looking at something.
And what's that email address? I'll include it in the show notes, but just in case.
It's renpowell.writer@gmail.com.
And are you on the socials?
Yes. Not many. I think I'm probably going to leave Facebook, but I'm on Facebook right now. I'm also on Instagram as Mad Orphan Lit, all one word, Mad Orphan Lit.
Wonderful. Ren Powell, thank you for coming on to this episode of Playwright Spotlight.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for turning into this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Again, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share this episode with a friend. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. And in the meantime, and until we see each other again, keep writing.